Good afternoon. This is the June 27th Land Use Committee meeting. I'll ask everyone to introduce themselves. I'm Jay Rose Pepe, City Council Chair.
Eric Warden, City Council.
Scott Diener, City Council, position 3.
Nick Bond, Community Development Director for the city.
Jim Fisk, Principal Planner for the city.
We have a published agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda? I have one, but Eric or Scott, any additions?
I just a quick. Oh, go ahead.
Nope, I do not. Sorry.
I just was going to say how the derelict vessel program kickoff meeting went at the county today. At the end of the meeting, it's just a 1-minute update.
Okay, and I'll add that to the list. I also have one for city right away. Just a quick question for DCD, and you may be pointing me in a different direction. So, okay, discussion non-conforming uses and structures. We've discussed this the past, I believe, 2 meetings. We were looking for a little weigh-in on the legality, how to proceed, and so I'll turn it over to you, Nick.
All right, so we did meet with Charlotte Archer, the city attorney, and her advice is very similar to the previous advice that we've had, which is that adding something to our code that would allow people to perpetuate non-conforming uses or even expand non-conforming uses is not something that she advises. She did offer to write a white paper on the subject, but given, I review the legal bills every month. I did not want to spend money on that because the advice is consistent with what we have heard previously. And so if the committee wanted to see a white paper, she is willing to provide that. But I think that the takeaway is that if somebody has a property with a non-conforming use, we either need to change our code to make it conforming because that's something that we want to do universally for the zone, or we need to not allow the expansion of the non-conforming use. So she definitely does not recommend creating a process for the incremental expansion of non-conformities.
Okay. Anybody would like to weigh in on that before I weigh in?
Sure.
I'd also, if I can just add to
Sure.
Nick's, the other thing Charlotte said was if they want to make it conforming, they could seek a site-specific rezone to put it in a district that would allow that use.
Eric, Scott?
I'd like to see a white paper. I mean, for me, I understand that there may be some legal concerns, but I'd like to see those explored a little bit more in the white paper. But it's also, for me, a matter of being reasonable, especially in a day and age where housing concerns, as the example that has drawn this to our attention, housing concerns are a big deal. And if we've got to make an extra room for a kid to move in who can't afford housing anywhere else, we ought to maybe consider that. So I'm not suggesting that it get blown wide open, but that there be a reasonable, limited opportunity for expansion.
Is the reason that are we nervous to we feel we have to take each case individually? And once you take one, you have to take them all? Is that what the concern is?
I think that I don't want to get into the specifics of the legal risk. I think it's better if it comes in a confidential legal memo from the attorney that is providing advice to us as a client. But I think generally there is significantly more risk of litigation in allowing for nonconformities to continue compared to having development that is consistent with our zoning. And so I think that when we approve something and it's consistent with zoning, that's a very low risk thing. And when we're reviewing things that do not conform to code and are granting exceptions to the rule, there are multiple more risk points in that entire process. So, but I would let her advise you on the specific risk and also any case law that exists on the subject.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we would like to get the white paper, a little bit more information from Charlie, and we'll hold this in advance for another to our next meeting, or when she's able to get us the white paper. I don't believe we're in any hurry or extremis to get this done like next week or something.
All right, I will coordinate with Charlie and the mayor and let them know that the land use committee is seeking the white paper.
Yeah, just my 2 cents is I'm not a fan of doing exception, singularly exception that goes down I've seen that in the school district in various ways. Obviously not zoning, but through school boundaries and things. And once the ball gets rolling, it can be a handful, not to mention the fact that I believe every zoning change or exception has to come to city council. Am I correct, Nick?
That is correct.
Okay, next item, comprehensive plan, periodic update, draft elements.
Jim, do you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah. So first, if you had trouble accessing the packet through the link in the agenda, lessons learned, but that is now fixed. You should be able to get to it if you take that address and paste it into your web browser. Additionally, all of the packet consists of all the draft elements, is available on the periodic update webpage. So that's everything that was in the packet, with the exception of the comment matrix. So as you know, we've been working diligently on this the last few months. We delivered these drafts to the Planning Commission in June. We're awaiting comments from them. But we've also given our deliverables for the periodic update grant year 2 to the Department of Commerce. So happy that we met that deadline. Apologize, my dog is barking at the door. We anticipate the Planning Commission providing a recommendation on the comp plan, hopefully by September. And then this will kick it to the City Council for additional review. So if you have any comments, you can either hold them to see what the recommendation of the Planning Commission is. The budget is not in their purview, so there's going to be some areas of the comp plan where the City Council will have to weigh in on those types of things. We've been working on the capital facilities element the last week or two, and so there's some work to be done there. So we still need to get this adopted by the end of the year, end of December. And so you guys are going to have a very busy fall with budget and the comp plan. But we're hopeful that you can provide comments in a timely manner and we can make those revisions so that we can meet our deadlines.
So, Jim, would it be fair to say, I mean, this is not the world's largest document. Would it be fair to say, though, that it would that even though there may be some changes from the Planning Commission, that it would be a good idea for council members to start reviewing it now as the ball keeps going, as more things are coming down the pipe.
I don't think that the content for the most part is going to change. So what you read in this packet is likely very similar to what the Planning Commission is ultimately going to recommend. So It would be a good idea to get a head start. I did mention the comment matrix. If you look in the packet, it's toward the end. We received, I think, 178 comments or something along that line.
Do you have a page number for those comments?
I can find it for you. It's not easily find it for you.
Is it at the very end?
It's close to the end. It's right before the sub area plans.
Okay, I'm having trouble pulling
Here,
it.
it's if you go to, there we go. I found it. Let me get to the beginning of it. It's going to be there's a lot of pages on it. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Like 227 to, I'd start at around 215. You should be, at 216.
Yep.
Got it.
So we we responded to each one of those comments, either incorporating it into the plan or not. Some of it requires some additional discussion.
Nick, you want to weigh in?
Well, I think what I wanted to add is just kind of the expectations for the comp plan going forward. There are still a number of exhibits we're waiting on from our consultant. We are also putting the finishing touches on the 2 sub-area plans for the Bethel Lund and Bethel Sedgwick areas. And those sub-area plans, depending on the preferred alternative for the sub-area, will impact the transportation modeling. And so there's still a little bit of analysis that needs to be done that will get wrapped up towards the end of July, early August. We're aiming to start the public hearing process at the Planning Commission in August, though I'm not certain that we'll be able to get a recommendation from the Planning Commission until at least September. And we're talking about possibly a special Planning Commission meeting in mid-September to hopefully get a recommendation on the comprehensive plan at that time. As you are all aware, we're heading into budget this September. You also are going to be tackling the comprehensive plan at the same time, which is going to be a ton of reading and a ton of review for you. So I believe Jim and I are planning on a September work study meeting where we're going to kind of walk you through the Planning Commission recommendation, or at least the draft plan as it exists at the Planning Commission at that time, so that you can start asking questions and dive into it, because we're going to need to adopt it in December of this year in order to meet our deadline.
So you would have you wouldn't have any problem if I kind of just pushed a little bit, prodding people to start reading this now?
No, I think that is a good idea, and you just have to have the caveat that there are some sections that will still change between now and when the Planning Commission forwards their recommendation. But please, if there are major concerns, we need to hear about those sooner rather than later so that we can start working on fixes. I will also say that our capital facilities element is going to be very different than it used to be. And the direction that we're receiving from the Department of Commerce is to have basically a 6-year funding plan for capital projects in the city. And so our consultants met with all of the different departments. We're talking about the public works facility needs. We're talking about water, sewer, stormwater transportation projects for which we have grants. And so we're still kind of refining the capital facilities element. And I expect that as the budget gets underway, the council is going to direct us to change certain things in that chapter. So I think it's important for you to start reading that and thinking about budget, not only for the next 2 years, but also for the full 6-year planning period. And we need to get that as close to finished as possible. And that element will get updated every year to reflect any grants that we receive or any projects that we are choosing to initiate. So capital facilities is very much still a work in progress. And I think that's really where the rubber meets the road as far as where you're going to have the most concern in terms of the things that we're identifying for spending. And Jim and I met with Public Works and Finance today to start going through this and try to put each project in a different year within the next 6 years. And there's a lot of information we still don't know. One of the projects you're aware of is the Foster Pilot Program, where we're having to mitigate impacts in order to drill these new wells. We're being told that we're going to be spending $500,000 or $1 million a year for the next 6 years from water on mitigation projects in order to secure those water rights. And it's not that we have to do those projects before we get the water rights. We'll be granted the water rights on the condition that we perform certain mitigation projects. And so we're having to program money now for things that we're not even sure which projects we're going to build as part of Foster. So some projects we have very good information on, and other projects it's just a WAG. And we're putting numbers in there that ultimately will likely have to be changed in subsequent years. And some of the numbers are big and a little bit frightening.
Yeah. Eric?
Sure, good. So over the next 90 days, do as much reviewing and bring questions as possible. That way in September, we're not just pounding you with questions. You're more detailing and finalizing the comp plan, correct?
Well, I think that we will have a better discussion at September work study if we are not presenting this information for the first time, if we're actually diving a little bit deeper into the substance. So
Yeah.
the more you can read ahead of time, I think the more productive our meeting in September will be, and the less work it will be while you're also trying to finish the budget.
Just to second what Jay said about kind of putting thumb on people to encourage them to start reading it. I like Jay's idea there. Yeah.
Scott?
So, Nick, I've asked before, for this kind of a read, could we get in order of importance what you think we should be focusing on? Obviously, you did speak to capital facilities, the CIP, but, if you could perhaps send an email out saying these are the things that are gonna maybe have the most flashpoints or we need further guidance on, and whereas these things are pretty stable, we don't expect much change, and they're in a safe harbor. That would be helpful for us so that we're not trying to read 345 pages top to
Mhm.
bottom when really we can begin with our priority read.
Yeah, we can send you something, but I would just say capital facilities, transportation, are probably the top two. Land use, while it's really important, we're not changing a whole lot. So I don't think there are any surprises in the land use or housing elements, even though we have mandates and we're having all of these requirements for planning for housing. Those mandates aren't really triggering change in our development regulations to the extent that we are really focused on the capital side, and even the utilities chapter isn't that different because those are informed by our system plans, which go through a separate review process. So it's really documenting what's in our system plans more so than it is creating something totally new. So yeah, transportation, capital facilities. I would say that climate, natural systems, parks are all probably the ones you should focus on the least, because climate is optional. And so we're choosing to provide kind of a basis in our climate goals. We do have a mandate 5 years from now, and so that's going to have to become more robust. And as state guidelines come out for the climate element, we'll be updating that. But natural systems, there aren't a lot of changes to. And parks is informed by our parks plan, and there really aren't a whole lot of changes there either.
Scott, you have another comment?
And then I did just have just a quick question. Nick, if you could let us know what examples of mitigation might look like for the Foster. I'm just real curious what that looks like.
So we've had some conversations, and because some of them involve purchasing property, I'm not going to give anything specific, but it is possible that we would have to buy property, like agricultural property outside of the city that has water rights, to acquire those water rights and take them offline. It is possible that we will have to buy property on which we can build mitigation projects, either to do restoration to streams to help in-stream flow and fish habitat. It's possible that culvert or other stormwater improvements that are already part of our stormwater plan will also count as mitigation under Foster. So some of the projects really do overlap with stormwater, and it's possible that the water system is going to be paying for stormwater improvements as mitigation for Foster. But really, until we get the final approval for Foster, we don't know specifically which projects we're going to be looking at. But we've got some ideas that are specific. We just don't want to disclose those because some of them may involve buying property.
Yeah, I understand. Is there going to be, do you feel like there's going to be grant opportunities or aid from the state to work through these? Because this is a big lift, especially for smaller jurisdictions.
I don't think there's going to be grants. I think that we might be able to get low interest loans under DWSRF where we can, because this is an improvement related to our water system. And so I think that makes it eligible, but I really don't know for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't mean to step on it, but this is one where Jackie had mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, that in reality, we're still kind of, it's very hazy right now. Because we're still waiting for, we're waiting for both tribes to get back with comments on some of our proposals. So we haven't even gotten, for lack of better words, approval to even move ahead with what we think we might even be able to do to mitigate it.
Yeah, it's very gray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tribes are not necessarily playing, in my words, playing nice about some of this. They have a long view, and they're going to want to maintain it, which I can respect. But it could be pretty impacting.
Yeah. Not disagreeing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
anything on the subject, Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that Nick and I will be down at the farmer's market on July 20th, doing some outreach for the comp plan, as well as the sub area plans. We do have a sub area plan workshop scheduled for July 24th, and we're going to hold that at the library on the 24th, starting at 6 o'clock. So, in case you want to let anybody know,
July
you're welcome
20th.
to attend.
Okay. You want to go first with derelict vessel? You had a comment on that.
Oh yeah, so we kicked off the countywide derelict vessel program. The idea is to remove abandoned and derelict vessels without going through a process like today's, which is rather extensive and can be expensive. But DNR is helping with that under recent legislation. But the all the ports were represented, including the Port of Allen. Port Orchard had representation. Officer Holden was there. Several different representatives from different agencies, DNR, Fish and Wildlife. Trying to think of, I don't believe ecology was there, but in any case, there was probably 45 attendees overall, and all of them were very excited. There was lots of energy on this, including what some of us felt was energy by Kitsap County Sheriff's Office to kind of assume a greater role on behalf of cities for this, which I can see is good in that it frees up police officer resources for inland patrols. But we actually ran out of time for all of the comments that people wanted to give. We had to kind of cut modules off because we had a strict schedule of 1 to 3. But it was very well attended, lots of energy. We worked through the charter today for that, and the next meeting will discuss barriers. So we'll start reporting out on that. That's a project that's being led by staff in my division at DCD. So I'm very excited about it. I have lots to say about it, of course, being very interested in our marine environment. So anyways, that went really well.
A quick question. Is any change in the funding from the state for it, or because I know that's always been, speaking of barriers, that's always been a barrier to how many vessels we could take out.
Yeah, I think there was discussion about lobbying to increase that budget amount, as well as there's a lot of barriers that exist in our RCW, and it's not just one or two, there's a bunch, and it becomes a very complicated landscape when you try and navigate it to depending on what jurisdictions you are, where the boat's been, whether it's come off of auction as a derelict vessel and now it's back in the water. They described how that's a practice by some people. So what was also interesting is there was a port attorney there, and he was guiding some of the ideas about lobbying the state on some changes that are needed. I think for me, they're no-brainers, but nothing's ever that easy. So we're going to start relying on some of his resources, depending on what his contract amount looks like.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have one question. When we exhaust the state's dollars to remove derelict vehicles, like you said, you get so many, I don't know what that number is, but once you exhaust that, then who pays for it? Is it whoever the derelict vehicle marine is, the derelict boat is closest to, say Port Orchard versus Paulsbo? How does that get determined?
It's jurisdictional. So for example, in Sinclair Inlet, and Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the city's boundary meets Bremerton's boundary in the middle of the waterway.
That's correct.
So that's how you would determine who has responsibility for that. And then if there's no state funding, it becomes a local problem.
Yeah, yeah.
And good
And
luck.
Nick, you may know more about this already, so feel free to correct me if I'm.
Well, I haven't gotten super involved in it, but I know our police department and code enforcement department have worked together on this, but police has been the lead. But we have done boat removal
Yeah,
projects,
yeah.
and I think I don't remember whether it's a reimbursement basis that we may get reimbursed, but we have
It's
spent city
reimbursed.
money on this.
Yeah, we don't get money up front. It's
Yeah,
reimbursed.
it's reimbursement.
On that. But we had one of the things, Scott, and I'm sorry, I know this is going longer than what we thought, but just since you're kind of honchoing this, it's always been one where we had a crackdown several years ago on this, and
Yeah.
it was very
Yep.
positive. And my wondering was how many people just moved theirs to another jurisdiction.
So that's part of the issue. That's why many years ago, well, I say many, maybe 6 years ago, Port Orchard took the lead on trying to draft a model ordinance that would allow us to chase down those that are moving boat from port to port to port or city waters. And so we brought up the idea again of looking at that. And Rob sent, I believe, I haven't checked my email, but I heard he sent a draft ordinance that the city kind of dropped. I don't know exactly recall why, but it provides good framework for moving forward. And yes, that exact issue of these guys hopping from port to port or outside of port jurisdictions and just anchoring up, that was discussed. It was interesting to hear how some of these boats pass through chains of ownership.
Right.
They get acquired, they go to auction, somebody buys them for $100, they borrow a neighbor's 10-horse outboard and they motor it out to a spot they like, and then they anchor it and they're good to go. And it's also nice to remind people that ugly boats may not necessarily be derelict or abandoned. They're just ugly boats that people are living on. So.
All right. I think any other questions on this one? Okay. I have a last one before I ask anybody else for last comments. Been putting some thought into this, and I'm not, this is not a what I would want a knee-jerk reaction, but it keeps coming up when we're looking at some of our planning, especially regarding transportation, and that's talking about city right-of-way. And in several cases, we know that there are properties that are on city right-of-way or utilize city right-of-way for business, business parking and stuff. And I was just curious, have we ever done a notification of folks before? I mean, I know we do when we're looking at project wise, but if somebody is at street XYZ, they're utilizing city right away for their fencing. Have we ever, we're not going to use we don't have any intent to use that right now, but you never know. Have we ever said, okay, we need to let the folks on XYZ know that they have city right away. We're not asking them to vacate it now, but just be aware you're on it. Don't be surprised.
We have not done that, and it would be I think a pretty huge project to go through and kind of document that. Right now, we do send letters when we see somebody building something, we notify them that it's a problem to prevent the problem from getting worse. And when issues come up where we have to repair something and we say, hey, there's a fence in the right of way, we will let people know that it needs to be moved. But I mean, it could be. I wouldn't even know whether it's 10% or 50% of the properties in the city that have these sorts of encroachments, whether it's landscaping or other improvements that they've made within the right of way. So you have fences, you can have retaining walls that are decorative, you can have retaining walls that are structural. There's any number of improvements that should have a street use permit but don't, or that those improvements were built before we had a requirement for a street use permit. And it would be a huge effort to untangle that.
So Nick, on the extreme end, we could say no when we see people coming in. And I argued for that position a long time ago, because once you let those go in, then there's a lot of heartache and frustration and even disagreement and people posturing and attorneys to get those out of the right of way. And so I've always felt like, mind your property boundaries, but I did not prevail in my thoughts years ago on that.
Yeah, I mean, in concept, I like the idea, but I think that in a lot of cases, in the absence of a survey, people don't know where their corners are. You also have situations where we have areas of the city where surveys were off by as much as 40 feet when people built things. And so there are houses in the right of way. I mean, there are major problems in Port Orchard. Mystery Lane was one where we worked with an attorney to help a whole street of
Yeah,
people
that's right.
resolve their issues. And I think that the task is just enormous if we were to take that on.
I'm thinking about moving forward, and where we see people moving fences into the right of way clearly or expanding their yards into the right of way clearly.
Well, I'd like to at least put this on the parking lot. Not so much that it needs to happen right now, but the reason I bring this up is, when we start looking at, Bethel, or, we're looking at several areas in the future, it may save us some heartache by people being aware that they're encroached or, been on there. And so it's not a surprise to them. And I don't know sometimes why it should be, but for some reason it is. I just put it in the parking lot if you wouldn't mind for a discussion item. And so we can try to have some idea before we bring it to council, if that's
Sure.
direction we want to go. Eric, go ahead.
And oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I deal with my day job, the same sort of thing with utility easements.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. New homeowners will purchase, they don't know. Next thing you know, they just put up a beautiful $20,000 fence. And it's challenging. I think with these businesses, and when they rotate businesses in and out as well, they think that's established parking. And I think you're right as far as with Bethel trying to get a jump on it. So not everything's a shock when we approach them, but it's challenging. So.
And the challenge with focusing on just those roads where we know we're going to have projects is that anytime those projects end up being federally funded, we have to follow the Uniform Relocation Act, and there are specific federal steps you follow to clear encroachments. And so by focusing only on corridors where we have improvements, I think we would potentially get into trouble. And I just dropped into one random street here. I'm on Klein between the courthouse and downtown, and I would say half of the businesses and or houses on Klein between City Hall and the county courthouse probably have an encroachment in the right of way. And some of them are retaining walls, some of them are fences, but and without actually knowing the exact location of the property line in the field, some of those encroachments may be 6 inches and some of them may be 10 feet, but somebody actually has to definitively determine that there is conclusively an encroachment, which is a lot harder than just relying on GIS.
And expensive to do.
Okay. Could we at least put it in a parking lot right now? So we can discuss this a little bit further, and maybe we can, Scott and Eric, kind of put wrap your heads around it a little bit, and we can talk about it at a later date.
I get the reason why you're bringing it up.
Okay, I don't want anybody to feel like they're being censored. So does anybody else have anything for the good of the order before we let Nick get on his way?
Well, I have one more announcement. I meant to announce this at council on Tuesday, but tomorrow we should get the 2024 OFM population numbers.
Oh.
So I've seen the preliminary numbers. I think we're going to be at about 4.5% growth. And we will get new signs ordered at welcome to Port Orchard at every city limit boundary. I think the signs currently say 16,400 and they're 2 years old. So there will be a sizable jump on the signs that people will notice, and you might hear about it. But as soon as I get the numbers, I'll send the full council a link to that either tomorrow or Monday.
All right. Okay. Exciting.
Yeah.
Anything else for the good of the order? Thank you all very much. And Nick, could you just hang on for 1 second?
Will do.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Night.
Hey there.